We're about to start broadcasting live on YouTube, so anybody who's watching there will be able to see us. We have about 5 minutes before we officially start, but I thought now would be a good time to start greeting people as they join the viewership here. Looks like we have 7 people who have already joined so far. So everybody, thank you for showing up early to the Urban Breakfast. Welcome. I just want to remind everyone who's joining now that if you have any questions that you would like Neil and Brian to answer later on in the webinar, you can put your questions in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the screen. And then anything else you want to say, put that in the webinar chat, which is on the right-hand sidebar. And with that in mind, we'll just wait for a few more people to show up, and then we'll kick things off in about 5 minutes. Getting all the technical things squared away. All right. Are we good on YouTube now? Nice. Beautiful. Did everybody bring coffee this morning?
No, but I'm assuming Neil has his tea with him.
Yeah, Neil, do you need coffee first thing in the morning?
Got it on intravenous drip, man.
Some days you need that constantly. I know I do.
Hey, the last webinar is going to be at 3 in the morning here.
Oh, wow. Might as well just stay up all night and wait for it.
Yeah.
What's the game plan? You gonna take a nap after this, or just kind of stay up and go through the workday?
Oh, we got an internal CDIA meeting in a few hours' time. So yeah, this is it now.
Oh, got it. Oh yeah, you have your weekly meeting on Thursdays, right?
That's right. Yeah.
The big meeting. We're always hearing from On about that.
Yeah, it's just the way of things at the moment. I mean, the team is spread all the way around the world. We just got to deal with it. It's there's no point trying to change what we do or how we do. You just got to get on with it.
Yeah,
I agree. Just got to do what we do.
So is this the earliest you've had to wake up for a work-related event, or have there been earlier wake-ups?
No. I had a meeting with AIIB, the China bank, at 2:30, I think it was.
Wow.
That's not fun. That's not fun at all.
Trying to make sense at 2:30 in the morning wasn't a great idea, but if that's the only time they can meet, then that's what we do, isn't it?
Wow.
See, CDIA is dedicated to duty, Ben. This is it.
Okay, we have the 1-minute warning. Let's do some final checks here. Cool. Looks like we have some more people joining us. Welcome to everybody else who is joining the call right now. One more time, just want to remind people that if they have any questions for Neil and Brian, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. You click the little Q&A icon, and you can put your questions for them there. And everything else will be in the webinar chat, which is on the right-hand sidebar. Throughout the webinar, we'll be adding a few links that are relevant to what we're talking about, so you can see everything there. Okay. Somebody is asking, thank you for arranging the session. How long is the session expected to be? Yeah, so just so everybody knows, this is a 45-minute session this morning. So it's going to roughly be 30 minutes of conversation with Neil and Brian, and then after that, there's a Q&A section where they will answer some of your questions. So any questions you have, we'll try to get to those in the last 15 minutes. Okay, it looks like it's 10 o'clock for us, which means it's time for our second urban breakfast. So let's go ahead and get things going here. So everybody, welcome, good morning. Thank you for joining the second urban breakfast webinar with CDIA. I'm Ben Engelbach, and I'll moderate the session today. Before we get started, most of you probably know what CDIA is, but just in case you're new, let's do a quick recap. CDIA is the city's development initiative for Asia, and that is a trust fund managed by the Asian Development Bank. What they do is they help prepare infrastructure preparation projects that benefit secondary cities in Asia and the Pacific in a way that increases their livability and sustainability. So today's dialogue is called Out with the Old. It's not about old people, it's about old methods. It focuses on how, in this case, smart waste management practices can increase livability in your city for the current generation and next. So one quick thing before we move on, as I just mentioned, we do have a Q&A session, which is going to start in about 30 minutes. So make sure you stay until the end, and you'll have a chance to bring your questions to Neil and Brian, who are joining us now. The questions go in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And so anything you want to ask, go ahead and put those questions there. So waste management is a very detailed topic. And to help us unpack it a little bit, we have with us this morning Brian Capati, who is a CDIA Urban Development Specialist, and his colleague, CDIA Program Manager, Neil Chatter. So Neil and Brian have years of collective experience with waste management and other areas of urban developments. And with that in mind, it's good to have them here, and I'm going to go ahead and let them take over now. So without further ado, Neil, I'll leave it to you to say hi to everyone and introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Great to be in touch with you. My name is Neil Chatter. I'm Program Manager for CDIA. I've been doing that for about 4 years. I love the concept of CDIA. Working with cities is a great experience. We got a great team here, and we're all very dedicated to the approach we have to our work. Frankly, I'll be honest with you, this is the best job I've ever had. So it's something I thoroughly enjoy, and I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss this with you in a bit more detail today. So over to Brian.
Good morning, Ben. Thanks. Good morning, Neil, and very good morning as well to everyone joining us. It is indeed a privilege for me to participate alongside such an esteemed colleague as Neil, and for CDIA to be given a unique platform for everyone to get to know us better. By the way, Ben, just to give a little rationale to the title of this morning's session. First of all, Out with the Old is not a slight to our senior colleagues. Instead, it's a bit of a playful and succinct way of reminding everyone that we should adopt a novel view that solid waste management approaches need to be holistic, considering all of the aspects and activity chain and everyone affected as well. And with that in mind, good morning and welcome to everyone.
Morning, Brian. Morning, Neil. Once again, thank you for joining us. So before we get to the first few questions, I want to quickly get to know the attendees who have joined us today. And to do that, we've actually put together a quick poll that they can take right now, and we'll be able to see the responses to the questions that they put into the program. So if you look in the chat box right now, everybody, there is a link to a poll at slido.com. That's slido.com. So what you do is on your phone, go to slido.com and then enter the code UB2, and that's going to bring you to the survey. And once you join that survey, it's just a few questions about where you're from, how old you are, things like that, and that's going to kind of help us get to know who's watching today. So just go ahead and join the survey on your smartphone right now, and we'll be able to see your responses up here on the screen in real time. So go ahead and start answering that survey, and we'll prepare to answer the first few questions. All right. You should be able to see, we're sharing the screen right now. You should be able to see the survey results. Yeah, so we have some people from Makati City, Quezon City, Philippines, Jakarta in Indonesia, Bangkok. Neil, any friends joining from England this morning?
I hope they're early risers like me as they are.
Nepal, Mumbai, Philippines.
Wonderful.
Kathmandu, Mumbai, again. Cagayan de Oro, I might not be saying that right. We have Hanoi, Bangkok. Nice, so a good group of people here today. So welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining. I know it's morning time in Asia, so it's a little easier for people to join from Asia. England might be a struggle. Colombo, Sri Lanka, cool. Okay, so that's where everybody's from. I believe next question, we're going to go to that right now. This is your gender. So right now, 100% male viewership. I know that can't be right. It's got to be some other ones. There we go. Okay. Some women are answering as well. Nice. Well, Neil and Brian, you have a lot of female fans, it looks like. 57% to 43.
You're trying to make me blush, Ben, huh?
Not a surprise. Cool. All right, let's go on to the next question. I think there might be just one or two more. Okay, so this next question, what is your interest in today's Urban Breakfast webinar? So basically, the reason you're joining us today, we're interested to hear what brought you here to be with us this morning. Topic, waste management in Asia. It's a big topic, very broad. We'll talk about a lot of facets of it today. Learn more about urban waste management post-COVID, best practices in waste management in developing countries, wastewater disposal, solutions for urban waste management. Okay, well, looks like you came to the right place. We have some of the most qualified people to talk about this. Great. All right, is that the last question for the survey? Okay, just one more for this part of the survey. We're going to go to that now. All right. Okay, thanks for responding, everybody. And also, one more quick thing. If you'd like to receive the CDIA newsletter every 2 months, just please leave your email address here. And we'll make sure that you get the newsletter when it comes out. I think the next newsletter comes out the end of this month. So we'll stop the screen sharing, so don't worry, no one's going to see your email and anything like that. So just enter it there and we'll collect the email addresses. And CDIA is very busy. They're up to a lot of different things. So the newsletters have a full recap of what they've been up to. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. We have some questions for you, Neil and Brian, and I'm curious to hear your answers. So the first topic that we want to talk about today is perceptions and expectation. First question is for you, Neil. I'm curious if you could let me know, what objectives do you find that city officials usually have in mind when they are starting solid waste management projects?
Bearing in mind that solid waste management is usually a basic urban service provided by city governments to their citizens, city officials always aim to respond to citizens' needs and requests to keep the environment and the population safe. So when cities and the city officials endeavor to respond to these requests and address solid waste management issues in their cities, they become more cognizant of the institutional, infrastructure, and operational gaps that they currently have. So in general, we have noticed that addressing these infrastructure, institutional, and operational gaps are the focus of city officials when they are initiating their solid waste management projects.
Takes a second. I think you're on mute, Chief.
Sorry?
I just realized I was muted. I'm back. All right.
It's the most common words I've heard over the last 6 months. Hey guys, you're on mute.
It's never happened to me before, so I'm ashamed. It finally did.
It happens to me about 3 times a week, so don't worry.
Oh, great. Okay, I don't feel so bad. Okay, Neil. So next question is for you. We're curious to know, what would you say are the usual expected benefits and impacts of an enhanced solid waste management system?
I think that was actually the question for Brian, Ben. Sorry.
Oh, well, sorry about that. Brian, we'd love to hear more from you if you have any insights on this. Oh, now Brian is muted.
Sure. So the main benefit of a good solid waste management system is always protecting and preserving the environment, which in turn leads to protecting and preserving the health and safety of the population. Also, it is good to bear in mind that a good solid waste management system also has significant co-benefits to other urban infrastructure systems. Say, for example, for water supply, where ground and surface water quality is preserved, and for flood and drainage facilities, where the reduction of waste that is disposed of in waterways greatly increases the capacity and efficiency of such infrastructure. Also, I would say that benefits should also extend to communities affected by solid waste management projects. So this can be done by means of the provision of alternative livelihoods to existing unsafe and uncontrolled ones. Probably good to cite an example in our recently completed slum improvement project in Indonesia, which also has a solid waste management component. In this project, we focused on improving the prevalent solid waste management problems in informal settlements by addressing citywide solutions to solid waste management. This was done with a particular emphasis on maintaining informal settlement livelihood and the improvement of their living conditions.
Great, thank you, Brian. Neil, next question. This one I'm pretty sure is for you. So how do you know that a city is ready to take on a solid waste management project?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Look, it's all through talking to officials and the key stakeholders. This is always the first step for CDIA. When we get an application from a city, we parachute in, we meet people, we assess the situation, and we take it from there. While the need for a project is normally pretty obvious through the littering or poorly managed dump sites, the desire for change is not always so clear. There has to be a clear political will to change and improve the situation. Without this, solid waste management is a complex and a difficult issue. And without the political will to change, there's no chance of project success. Look, Asia is littered with failed solid waste management projects, which have been driven by donors rather than by the cities. That's why in CDIA, we work with the cities because we can get right to the core of the problem. There has to be a champion or champions for change. There's got to be someone within the institutional management of a city who can partner with us to drive the project. A real key aspect here is a willingness of the city to undergo institutional change. There's no point implementing a solid waste management project if the city is not willing to change its approach. Could be a variety of aspects. It may be necessary to perhaps change the departmental structure of a city's municipality. People don't always want to do that because there's lots of self-interest aspects there and power battles going on within cities, and they've got to be willing to create the mechanism to implement a project. People have also got to be willing to look at private sector. So essentially, then, we know when it's good to go if we can go to a city, talk to officials, and really feel that there is a strong desire to take the project forward.
Great. Thank you, Neil. Let's talk a little bit about some trends in solid waste management. So Neil, we do have another question for you at this point, and that is, what would you say in an urban community, what communities are most affected by a city's solid waste management services?
Yeah, interesting. Look, I've always felt that there's been an imbalance in the provision of services in any city, whereby the more affluent tend to benefit the most. And that applies to water supply, sewerage, roads, street lighting, stormwater drainage. Solid waste management is the same, and frankly, this has got to change. We've got to find ways to provide services for all, and this is really at the heart of CDIA's pro-poor approach. We do not take on projects which do not have a holistic approach. We've got to be looking citywide, and indeed looking at the poorer areas first. One of our ongoing projects in Uzbekistan, in Juzak, we are specifically looking at the poorest areas of the city, as identified by the mayor and confirmed by myself during site visits. The political will I referred to earlier is really important here, because the same people have to have the right desire to look after the poorer people first rather than the most affluent. So that's something we're looking at. Now at the same time, we've got to bear in mind it's always the poor who suffer most when there's a lack of attention to solid waste management, whether this is the complete absence of services, blocked drainage channels in the vicinity of their homes, which cause flooding during the wet season, indiscriminate dumping of waste materials in the neighborhood, and all the problems which come through that, whether it be smell or vermin. So really, it's the poorer people always who are most affected. They don't get the benefits, and they suffer most due to the lack of it. And that's why we in CDIA try to address projects which affect them primarily.
Great. Neil, one follow-up aspect of this I'd like to talk about is what do you think is the impact of COVID-19 on solid waste management trends?
This has been a massive issue over recent months. There has been a recorded and very noticeable massive increase in the amount of medical waste. Now, many cities are not properly equipped to deal with normal domestic waste, so they certainly are not well equipped to deal with medical waste. But the risks are obvious because you've got equipment, materials discharged from hospitals which are likely to be carrying the virus, and makes workers and informal pickers at landfill very susceptible to this. Now, we're amending our standard or old approach to ensure that we're addressing medical waste in any solid waste project. This really looks at how we do the collection, how we do the disposal, whether we bring incineration, this sort of thing. Previously, prior to COVID, medical waste collection and disposal systems were almost a luxury add-on to a standard solid waste management project. Over the last 6 months, this is a must-do. We can't ignore it.
Understood. Brian, did you have anything you would like to add to that before we move on?
Yes, indeed. It's not only the disposal and treatment of medical waste that should be given attention to. Worth mentioning is that the containment, the transfer of these wastes should be taken into consideration before actually disposing and treating them and disposing them. So yeah, we in CDIA are taking care to incorporate such current and ongoing issues into our work and into our everyday activities in solid waste management.
Thank you, Brian. Brian, I'd like to send the next question your way. What can you tell us about waste to energy projects as a solid waste management trend?
Oh, okay, good question. I would say that waste to energy projects are a good example of the proverb, one man's junk is another man's treasure. But of course, with quite a bit of additional processes in the middle. So waste to energy technologies or projects are energy recovery processes that converts chemical from waste into practical forms of energy, like electricity, heat, or steam. Right now, and based on the prevalent conditions we've noticed, the thermal conversion techniques, or those that require the use of heat to process the waste, are the most usual and are currently leading the market among waste to energy technologies and projects. A good and common example of this would be incineration, or as many may know, the direct combustion of waste to produce heat, which is then used to generate electric power. However, what we have to take into consideration is that municipal solid waste, which is a significant portion of solid waste in general, has little calorific value. So this means that directly burning or incinerating it produces inadequate heat or thermal energy. So this is where the pre-treatment processes for project for municipal solid waste come in to induce more effective incineration. Examples of pre-treatment of municipal solid waste are refuse-derived fuel projects, projects involving gasification and pyrolysis, and of course, the more common and familiar anaerobic digestion projects. So to sum it all up, these pre-treatment processes or projects are carried out to produce fuel from municipal solid waste before combustion or incineration to generate more heat, to make the incineration process more effective and efficient.
Interesting. Wow, yeah, I didn't know that. That's very interesting. Well, we don't have too much time to dive into that, unfortunately, but what I do want to do is move on to talk a little bit more about some of CDIA's solid waste management projects across the region. Brian, which projects do you feel, in your experience, have had the most profound impact on the local areas?
Thanks for the question, Ben, and recognizing one of our participants from Cagayan de Oro. I'm reminded of what we did in Cagayan de Oro on a pre-feasibility study on solid waste management. The local community in Cagayan de Oro benefited from the closure of the existing dump site by being given a safer alternative to waste picking and scavenging at the old dump site. Based on our last visit in Cagayan de Oro 3 or 4 years ago, social preparation activities have really taken off. These are in the form of organization of cooperative associations, and capacity development activities for livelihood. These can be waste recycling and segregation. And these were carried out by the city as part of the project. And also worth noting is that the holistic improvement of solid waste management in Cagayan de Oro, from collection to final disposal, also created several entry employment opportunities for the local community to get involved in the project. Second, I would say another CDI supported solid waste management project is in Tangerang, Indonesia, where the conversion of an existing open dump site into a sanitary landfill greatly improved the surrounding environment of the open dump site. Worth noting is that this improvement also greatly further developed community-led initiatives on waste banking and recycling, which in turn greatly improved the mindset and involvement of the general population on the city-led solid waste management initiatives.
Interesting. I'm just curious, how long does it usually take to close an open dump site and substitute that with something new?
It depends, Ben, on the size of the dump site in the first place. Mm-hmm. So there are protocols, national protocols that followed for the closure of the said dump sites, but it highly depends on the size of the dump site and the concentration of the waste that is already deposited in it.
Right. Well, sounds like a big project, but it's good that the city's had you to help out with that. So, well, let's quickly move on to another question. Let's see here. So, Neil, I was curious to ask you, what can you tell us about CDIA's work with future solid waste management projects?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Look, I think there's several aspects I'd like to stress here and the way we're thinking as CDIA going forward, and it's affecting the way we're approaching our projects. The first is that CDIA, we're mainstreaming climate change adaptation and mitigation in all of our projects, and solid waste management is certainly no exception. Projects must have a holistic approach covering all aspects from the household to sanitary, landfill, completion, and closure. Sorting and recycling of waste is critical. We've got to separate out the organic waste and treat separately to avoid the generation of methane. And we've got to have appropriate landfill, and that's critical to avoid harmful gases leaking into the atmosphere. Too many times in the past, projects would look at individual components. So we're making sure for each project, we're looking at the whole picture and addressing every component. Linked to this is CDIA's commitment to stop plastic waste and promote clean oceans. This is something which has been neglected for far too long. Finally, the world seems to be waking up to the problem of plastic waste. This is a massive problem in Asia, where we have probably 3 or 4 of the most polluting countries in terms of plastic in the world. So we're in the right place to do something about it. CDIA, recent developments is that we're forming and we're committed to working with the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, where they're bringing in a lot of private sector finance to carry out projects which are going to address recycling and proper landfill. CDIA is working with the Alliance to help prepare projects, and this is a tremendous way forward because it means this whole fresh financing specifically coming in to deal with this issue, and we want to play our part in that. Another interesting trend going forward for us is that previously CDIA, we would work on a solid waste project, a sewerage project, or a drainage project. Our projects are becoming much more integrated as we go forward. So when we work in a city, we would look at multiple subsectors. I think an obvious one is you have to recognize that very difficult to do solid waste management projects if local urban access is restricted. In Laos, in our projects in the cities there, we found there's a very direct relationship between the quality of urban roads and indiscriminate dumping. If people can't collect the waste, they just dump it by the roadside. So what we're starting to do is look at roads at the same time as we're looking at solid waste management to ensure collection vehicles can actually get to the place where the waste is being generated. Another example, in Panaji in India, we were looking at the rejuvenation of the Sundanese Creek. And it's good to see one of my old colleagues from that project listening in on that. So that's cool. And we started off looking at hydraulics and tidal cleansing and cleaning up the rivers through natural solutions. But we really realized that before we can achieve that target, we've got to look at solid waste management, because that's probably the biggest source of pollution of the river. So yeah, CDIA group are going to be much more integrated going forwards, and there's lots of trends like this carrying on. The problem with solid waste management, Ben, we can talk. I could talk all day about it. There's so many aspects, and I was very grateful to see some of the comments made. If I can just use the opportunity to say that if people want to talk to us more, please contact us, because we'd love to have an exchange with you and learn what's happening in the cities where everybody is, because a lot of the cities listening in today, we've worked in with some of our favorite cities. I'd love to go over all these subjects in much more detail today, but please contact us afterwards, and let's continue the dialogue beyond the webinar.
Right.
Sorry, Ben, jumping in there.
No, it's all good. Actually, yeah, we'll make sure we put contact info for CDIA in the chat as well. So if anybody wants to carry on the conversation with you, they can easily do that. Brian, we are a little short on time, but I wanted to give you a few seconds to talk about your own thoughts on future trends.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Neil, for the information. And taking off from what you just mentioned on CDIA, mainstreaming climate change in all of our projects. Right now, we also have, we are in the early stages of initiating support to Phnom Penh in Cambodia for a refuse-derived fuel project. So we will be supporting the city in preparing feasibility studies for a refuse-derived fuel project, or RDF. So this particular project aims to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in cement manufacturing by providing an alternative and renewable fuel source to be used in cement kilns. And as Neil, related to what Neil just mentioned on having a holistic a view of solid waste management, as we may know that incineration of this fuel will greatly reduce volume of solid waste, we also recognize that landfill waste is also reduced due to this process. However, on the other hand, there still is remaining solid waste despite the process of burning this fuel. So we also focus and commit to assisting some cities in Indonesia in particular to improve landfill conditions and operations as part of our holistic approach to solid waste management. As Neil also correctly mentioned, assisting cities in Asia and the Pacific is considered a significant role and responsibility of CDIA, and recognizing that, as Neil mentioned, 4 of the top 5 countries in the world lead the list of countries putting the most plastic waste into the oceans, adds weight to the importance of supporting the development of solid waste management projects in the region. So we're here, we're staying here, and we're very much happy to help and have discussions and see how we can take our assistance forward with you, with the cities.
Great. Well, some urgent projects that require urgent work, but sounds like you're ready. So that's great. Neil and Brian, I think it's time to move on to some Q&A from the attendees. So we do have a few questions here that I'd like to send your way. Let's pull up the first one here. This is from Anne Pedretti. And Anne asks, she says, that you both mentioned the need for institutional change. And she says, to what extent can CDIA's work effectively support authorities in defining the right regulatory frameworks which will drive the development of waste management? So I'm not sure which one of you would like to take this one, but I'll throw it your way.
I apologize if I don't answer fully because the sound broke up a little bit. We're having some issues this morning, but what we do, let's say, fundamental to all of our work is looking at the institutional aspect. And when we start any project, we do a complete review of the situation, the institutional situation. We look at all the regulations and the local laws in place. And we try to set out a roadmap for change. It's very difficult. A CDIA project is typically 6 months, and it's difficult to make actual change during a 6-month period. Institutional change takes a lot longer, but what we do is we try to set out a short, a medium, and a long-term roadmap for change, pointing out and guiding cities on how they need to change their institutional, and that includes the regulations and the laws. And we try to guide. Obviously, anything legal takes a lot longer, but at least we try to guide the cities in the direction they need to go. Sometimes we will take officials from that city and take them to another city somewhere in Asia where the different laws are in place to show how it can work and to set out examples. So in short, very difficult for us to do within the scope of our own project, but we try to guide the city on how to take it forward.
Great, thank you, Neil. Let's go to a question from Kevin Serona. And Kevin asks, COVID has impacted solid waste management in towns and cities in both developed and developing economies. And how can we pandemic-proof future waste management programs? Brian, would you like to take this one?
Sure. I'm not really sure if there's such a thing as pandemic proofing, but yeah, I mean, we could come close, and definitely we should address it soon. What we have to recognize, as we've repeated quite a bit in this discussion, is that we have to take a holistic look at the process of disposing and waste, medical waste in particular. Right now, as Neil has mentioned, cities are sometimes ill-equipped to handle medical waste, but at least they should be cognizant of how it should be done properly. So as I mentioned earlier, it is highly critical that medical waste should be properly collected, transferred, treated, and disposed. So the collection and transfer is usually very critical in order to contain the viruses or infectious materials within medical waste. But when it comes to the treatment, there are quite a number of, a couple that comes to mind, processes that we can employ to treat the waste. The most common one is incineration, where basically medical waste is burned until, and the residue, which is no longer infectious or dangerous, is disposed in a landfill. For other cities which are more cognizant and mindful of emissions because of incineration, autoclaving is another option to consider. So autoclaving involves breaking down these medical waste, basically grinding them, and then employing steam to sterilize the broken down material, the broken down waste, prior then to final disposal. So yeah, having a look and being cognizant of the processes that are required to properly dispose and treat medical waste should be the first step, and this should be communicated to everybody. especially city governments and city leaders.
Thank you, Brian.
Can I jump in as well, please, if I may? I think Kevin's right to mention the terminology he's used is exactly right. He's talking about pandemic proofing, not COVID proofing. COVID is going to be the first of many such pandemics. Once we get past, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but this is going to happen more and more. So we shouldn't be talking about COVID this, COVID that. We should be talking about pandemic. This is going to happen again, and it's changed our thinking going forwards. This is not a short-term thing; it's a long-term thing. There's a key thing here which I want to stress is it all comes back to capacity development again, because all too often I find that cities don't care enough about their own employees. They're not sufficiently well equipped. We've got to have a whole attitude change, providing workers with PPE, taking care of their working environment. And that requires a fundamental way in cities' approach to these issues. There's many aspects. It's not just the physical, don't touch it, it's all about a duty of care to the employees and making sure we got the right processes in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. So unfortunately, we only have time for one more question, it looks like. So we're going to, and we have a lot of good questions here. What we did last week with the questions we didn't have time to get to is we had our guest speakers respond to the attendees via email. So we'll try to do the same thing in this context. But right now we have a question from Lisa, and Lisa, I'm sorry if I don't say your last name right. Lisa Pacalinawan. She asks, during early lockdowns, many recycling efforts were reduced or suspended. And she's asking if you have seen most of them reinstated, or are most of these programs still suspended?
That's a really interesting question, Lisa. Our difficulty at the moment is that we're all working remotely. It's so hard for us to actually keep in contact with cities. We're struggling to fully understand everything which is going on in each of our partner cities at the moment due to connection difficulties. My own thought is a lot of these services are still, they're not all fully functional, and I think a lot of these things have been put temporarily on hold. Very difficult to answer your question precisely because we don't currently have up-to-date information. That's something I think we need to look at, and I think we'll be contacting our cities and our partner cities and see how these things are going. But I'm sorry, it's hard to give a complete answer to your question. I'm very frustrated. I'm stuck in England and I want to be back in Asia.
Great. Well, Neil actually gave a very, oh, I'm sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Sorry, Ben. Just to indulge the question and also to share experiences in my particular city right now. I'm in Metro Manila, by the way, Valenzuela. So right now, as you said, at the onset of the pandemic, lockdown restrictions basically closed off quite a bit of services to the city, and initiatives like recycling have halted. But coupled with the easing up of lockdowns and the clear communication of guidelines, which goes hand in hand with easing up of lockdowns, recycling initiatives have now resumed, although at a smaller scale than what was usually done by the city. It's still being done, and collection. The city leaders in the Metro Manila at least made it a point that when it comes to collection of waste, there was no interruption actually, even if it was the pandemic at the onset of the pandemic. But of course, these waste collectors follow very strict governmental requirements on being safe and collect in their procedures in collecting waste.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
Cool.
So there were a few more questions that unfortunately we don't have too much time left, so we can't get to them. But we have questions from Kevin, Trevor, Achilles, and a few other people, and we'll make sure that Neil or Brian has a chance to respond to you with those answers later. So thank you very much for your questions. I see a new one from AJ as well. So don't worry, we didn't forget about you, and thank you very much for joining. Don't forget, if you would like to receive the CDIA bi-monthly email update, you can still respond to the question in the survey and put your email address there. No one else will see it, just CDIA. So you can put your email address right there. It looks like that just about wraps up the Q&A section and our second urban breakfast in general. So I just wanted to thank you very much, Neil and Brian, for your time and insights this morning, and thank everybody else who joined. As we close out here, I'd also like to thank CDIA's funders and supporters, which include the Asian Development Bank. Again, I never say this French agency's name right, but let's try. Agence Française de Développement, the European Union, the Federal Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Austria, German Cooperation, State Secretariat for Economic Affairs under the Swiss government. Whew, it takes a while to say. Again, city officials, if there's any city officials who would like to apply for CDIA project preparation support, the email address for that is CDIA_info@cdia.asia. And you can see that email address in the chat, in the chat box right there. So let's see, that just about wraps things up here. And one more thing, remember our next Urban Breakfast is next Thursday, October 22nd, and that will be at the same time. We will once again see CDIA Program Manager Neil Chatter and his colleague, Urban Development Expert Fabian Peruca, and they will be talking about how cities can build climate resilience. That's a very pressing topic, and we're looking forward to receiving some interesting insights from them on that. This month, CDIA also has the Better My City photo contest, and that's open to submissions until next week, October 23rd. That's the last day to submit photos. Basically, if you have any visions for improvements that you think could be made to your city, all you have to do is take a photo of your city and then edit the photo and then submit it to the link, which is right here in the chat box on the right. So hopefully you join that contest, and we're looking forward to seeing your submissions. So once again, Neil and Brian, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for joining, everybody.